in relaxing border control with Mexico, then your ideology is hindering the financial status of the United States. Each new wave of immigration has proven beneficial to the United States economy.
And we all have an immigrant heritage, and we all want to obtain the highest level of standard of living and level of happiness possible. So, relaxing the borders between the United States and Mexico, due to the amount of trade that both countries engage in, would greatly benefit both nations.
To present our argument, we will discuss the definition of reciprocity first, second, the value of immigrants, and third, the economic benefits of immigration.
The Oxford Dictionary defines reciprocity as the practice of exchanging things for mutual benefit, especially privileges granted from one organization or country to another. Now, the close trade partnership between Mexico and the United States primarily benefits the United States citizens, while privileges such as freedom to traverse the U.S.-Mexican border has not been extended to the laborers and farmers who produce the goods in order to make this trade partnership possible in the first place. Ricardo Martinez, who was a laborer on one of these Mexican mega farms, said, "I cried. They treated me like a slave."
So the U.S. is the third largest consumer of Mexican exports, and Mexico is the third largest consumer of United States exports.
The United States and Mexico have an undeniably codependent trade relationship, so there should be a mutually beneficial immigration policy put in place. Now, the United States, as a trade partner to Mexico, is kind of like the landlord who doesn't keep up with basic maintenance of the apartment. The tenant pays the bills, the tenant cleans the apartment. On the other hand, the landlord fails to respond to the work orders that the tenant has put in for the leaking roof and for the broken pipes. So the landlord's negligence has led to a very one-sided relationship between both parties. Now, if both parties were reciprocating efforts, there would be a much more positive environment for both to thrive.
So one of the most important values to the U.S. are immigrants and the skills that they bring into the country. So the U.S. stating that it doesn't want to relax its borders is kind of like the film industry saying that they no longer want to accept foreign-born talent. It just doesn't make sense. Both the United States and the film industry rely heavily on immigrants to fill jobs that the native-born citizens either can't or won't occupy. And according to the Migration Policy Institute, many Central American immigrants to the United States take jobs in manufacturing, labor, and farming that would otherwise be undersupplied by the native-born population. And contrary to our opponents' beliefs, Mexican workers don't actually take our jobs. And according to the Hamilton Project, a study that tries to provide non-biased information about immigration in the United States, immigrants are actually 30% more likely to start new businesses in the United States than native-born citizens are. So that's creating an even larger job pool for all of us to enter into.
From what you can see, immigration greatly benefits our economy, and it grows the size of it and helps all Americans. In addition, adjusting borders to allow more immigrants to come into the U.S. can decrease inflation. Currently, the U.S. imports 69% of its produce from Mexico. The U.S. has been a nation that has long prided itself on benefiting from a capitalist economy and competition.
With the U.S. producing comparatively little to Mexico, we have an unacceptable disadvantage in the food industry.
As it stands, the average rate of imports from Mexico are growing by an average of 5% per year. This is an unacceptable rate if we want to lower the cost of goods. The only way that we can lower our cost of goods is to create more competition in the U.S. and Mexico by allowing more migrant workers, many of whom will become farmers, to grow produce in the U.S. If we can increase our immigration numbers, we can effectively decrease the price of goods that we consume. According to the Liberal Policy Economic Institute, For every 1% increase in immigration, there is a 0.5% decrease in price of goods. Now, our opponents may argue that a 0.5% decrease is not enough to make an actual difference. But what should be argued is that any decrease in price of goods is an improvement over what we are paying now. Our opponents may also argue that, well, what if the immigrants have an opposite negative effect and it actually increases price? So to address this, we have to look at past studies. In 1990, Saul Lax conducted a study where he looked at the effects that 200,000 Jewish immigrants from Russia to Israel had on the economy of Israel. He concluded that they did in fact have a positive effect on the economy and lowered prices across the board in Israel as far as food. All things considered, immigration is beneficial to the U.S. If we can increase our number of immigrants coming across the border, we can decrease our prices and stand by American values. And in the future, we can use this immigration relaxation with Mexico to help us create new standards for all other countries of immigrants.
So, relaxing the borders between the U.S. and Mexico, due to our large amount of trade between each country, will greatly benefit both nations financially and in every other facet of life.
Do we really want to continue with an immigration policy that prevents both the United States and Mexico from greater economic prosperity?